Welcome to the Hazmatters Podcast, a discussion of all things hazardous for those who manufacture, distribute, transport, or handle hazardous materials in any way. Join the STARS Hazmat Consulting team, Wendy Buckley, founder and CEO, and Andrew Gulovsen, VP of Customer Experience, as we welcome guests to discuss topics and investigate real-world examples that affect our industry every day. The Hazmatters Podcast starts right now.
Before
Heidi ho, Wendy. How are you today?
Hello, Andrew. How are you again? Nice to see you.
It's good to see you as well. It feels like it's just been a short while. So what we want to talk to you today about is so again, kind of a dad joke kind of thing is what to expect when you're inspected. When inspections come and you're notified of various inspections, really kind of what to do, what not to do, that perspective on things. There's usually sort of this worry, people start sweating, oh my goodness, we're going to be inspected by whether it's OSHA, EPA, DOT, PHMSA, FRA, whatever it may be. Oh my gosh, we've done something wrong, which could be the case, but in other cases it's just, hey, this is part of it. It's the audit process of, where are you and how you're handling hazardous materials. So we want to dive into that. Anything you want to sort of, before we get started, talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I think the one thing I will say, and you and I touched on this briefly yesterday, and I do remember the conversation, is that one of the things that people always say is, well, we just had an inspection, so we're good. We got a clean bill of health. Don't confuse a good inspection with doing everything perfectly or doing everything right. Because as we talked about, Andrew, a lot of the inspectors have like their pet issues that they focus on when they do an inspection. And it really does depend on the inspector. I can tell you, I was a DOT inspector, as you know, and I can tell you that a lot of my colleagues did not like to be out in inclement weather. So when it was raining, they would go and look at training records and they would look at, shiv engravers and all kinds of things that they could do inside. When it was cold, they would drive around the rail yards or the ports or whatever and look for the low-hanging fruit, things that they could see from their car and not have to get out in the cold. Things like placards, bottom outlet valve caps hanging, bad bulging containers in the ports, things like that, right? Not all of the inspectors are like that. So even if you've had perfect inspections up to this point, or you never get an inspection, when that guy retires and your new inspector comes, he may have a totally different outlook. So yeah. Just because you got a great inspection doesn't mean it was a thorough inspection.
No, understood. And again, those people change as well, whether they retire, go do something else. And so you get a new inspector. Yeah, we all sort of gravitate towards what we're comfortable with and what we're familiar with. So yeah, if you were a packaging person, boom, you're gonna focus on packaging. If you were, definitely, very transportation centric or, in a trucking side of it, you may focus on that FRA, a lot of different things. So again, I think the comprehensiveness may not be there. It's focusing on a particular area. So very much so. So really kind of, to kind of start with, what are the things that trigger an inspection from, the perspective of DOT or PHMSA or FRA on things like that? What sort of initiates that?
Right. So obviously, if you have an incident, right, you have a big spill, you have a package that leaks in transportation, or something happens and someone gets hurt by your stuff. Obviously, that's going to trigger an inspection. I think everybody knows that, right? But what I think people don't necessarily appreciate, and some do, that get the regular inspections, but a lot of those inspections are routine. They have a plan, a loose plan anyway, to inspect certain companies yearly, some every 2 years. And it depends on the hazards of what you're shipping, right? So if you have poison gases, you're going to get a lot more attention than somebody who's just shipping combustible liquids, right? Because the relative danger is considerably different. If small packages for consumer use versus big tank trucks and tank cars and totes and things like that, obviously they're going to get more attention in the big packaging because they've got more risk. But I'll tell you, especially if you're a new company, a lot of people are like, oh, well, we're new, we're going to get an inspection. It takes them some time to find out that you're there, because you register with PHMSA, and if they've already got a plan, like, okay, Monday I'm going to go this company and this company, Tuesday I'm going to do this company, Thursday, Wednesday, and so forth. They might not have an opportunity or need to go to the PHMSA database and see. But it also doesn't mean that they won't. If they've got nothing to do on Thursday, they might go in and say, oh, what kind of new companies do I have in my jurisdiction? But it also might take a few years for them to figure out that you're there. So routine is definitely a part of it. Being a new company is definitely part of it. Having an incident is certainly going to get you more attention for sure.
No doubt. And then I guess in the Boy Scout world, always be prepared.
Yes.
So,
definitely.
from what, it's part of what we do.
To your point,
as
to always be prepared. Like I like that you said that, because one of the things is it's not just the inspection that you're preparing for. If you are constantly prepared for an inspection, remember those are the bare minimum federal standards, right? That may not be where you want to live, but you know that if you're always ready for that inspector to walk through the door, then you're at least doing the bare minimum. And since those regulations are written in blood, as we've talked about before, because someone got injured or something happened or there's environmental damage and they're trying to prevent it from happening again. So if you're at least at the bare minimum, then you're at least in the realm of what should be pretty safe. So yes, I like your comment. That's a good one. Always be prepared, Boy Scouts, right? But it's not just the inspection that you're end up preparing for. It's to at least meet the minimum safety standards.
Well, and you'll always be focused on it, because if it's something like, hey, this inspector can walk in any day, you're always ready for it. That means you're always focused on it. It becomes part of, daily meetings, and again, a lot of companies out there have those daily safety meetings. What are we going to focus on today? What are some of the things that, again, you do your own audits, you do your own inspections. You don't have to wait for that third party to come in and say you're doing this right or doing this wrong. You want to make sure you are managing that, kind of going forward. And so, like, even the notification of inspections, and in some cases, again, from a transportation standpoint, roadside, hey, the officer either sees something while the truck is moving, they pull it over and we do the roadside inspection. They may find something. Again, there'll be the ones where, they're pulling into, way stations to be able to do that. But from a facility standpoint, is there notification for inspections? Do you have,
so it depends,
30 days?
Yeah, it honestly depends. They're supposed to. If you pull through a way station and get an inspection, yeah, you're going to know that because the driver's right there. The driver's going to be able to tell you, plus he'll get an inspection report from either the police officer or the PUC or whomever is designated in that state to perform the inspection. And you're supposed to get it for the other modes too. I have found that usually happens. But a lot of times the rail cars, for example, are only inspected in the rail yards. They don't go to the chemical facility. So the railroad will certainly get the report that they got inspected. The companies are also supposed to get an inspection for each rail car of theirs that was inspected, but that doesn't always happen. And I'll tell you, one of the things that's the least transparent is the incident reports. So anytime you have an incident in transportation, the PHMSA incident database, that 5000.1 form that you fill out to report the incident, that's filled out by whomever is in possession of the material at the time of the incident. So because these are transportation accidents, usually it's going to be the carrier, right? The trucking company, the railroad, the air carrier, whatever. But what happens a lot of times is that when the carrier fills out the report, they deal with the incident. They don't necessarily always tell the shipper. There have been multiple times when I have pulled up an incident report for one of my clients, and there was incidents in there that they had no idea about. And generally, those are the small incidents, right? Because there's not going to be a lot of liability involved. They just clean it up and move on. Obviously, the bigger incidents they tend to know more about. But companies should definitely be checking that database regularly on their own just to see what's going on with their carriers, and especially when it comes time to renew their carrier contracts. If you have a carrier that's first having a lot of incidents, or secondly not communicating those to you, that's going to be in a relationship you're going to want to evaluate a lot closer.
No doubt. Some good stuff there. Like I said, we didn't get a chance to talk about that yesterday at all. So that's again, this is being prepared. What are you doing to do that? So this kind of comes to the next thing. And we can start with the sort of positives or negatives, but like, what are the things during the inspection, again, when they come to your facility, what are the things that you should be doing? And then we can talk about the things that don't do, as we go forward. So probably start with, some of the things that you should do.
Well, I'm going to reiterate what you already said, which was be prepared, right? The basic things that they're going to ask for. They're going to ask for training records. They're going to ask for your Hazmat registration. If you're a trucking company that has trucks, they're also going to ask for your FMCSA registration. They're going to want to see probably some procedures if they're looking at something specific. Those kinds of things. Shipping papers, of course, bills of lading, or the EDI transmissions if you're doing rail, whatever it is. They're going to want to see that stuff. So to prepare that. Have people cross-trained too. Because if the lady that manages the training records is on vacation that week or out camping and has no access to cell phones, somebody else in the company should be able to go and get those records to not only know where they are, but access them in a timely fashion. And my God, make sure you're keeping those records. Andrew, you and I have talked about in person as well as on the podcast before about what happens when you don't maintain those records. And we talked about someone we know being faced with $1 million fine for not maintaining records. Is that a safety problem? No, but it could cost dearly, right? So, those kinds of things they're going to ask for. So be ready and have people cross-trained so that if, Jane is out, John knows where to go to get them or something like that, right? I'd say some other things to do. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was just go. I know we've got a little bit of a delay here, so I apologize for that. So.
Yeah. And I don't mean to talk over you, but you're right. Like there is just a touch of a delay. So I apologize for that.
Go ahead.
I would say some other things to do are obviously know the rules. DOT does not accept, OSHA and EPA don't accept I didn't know. Because they assume that if you're handling hazardous materials that you knew or should have known. In other words, you had a duty to know what the rules were and to be following them. So if you don't know what you don't know, get help. Get training, get an audit, get a consultant, someone on the outside if you don't have that expertise within your company to help you understand what the rules are that apply to you. Because I don't know is not gonna cut it, right? No one ever is like, oh, dude, she's like, oh, you didn't know? Oh no, we're not gonna give you a fine then. Just next time, all right? It doesn't work like that.
Great if it happened, but unfortunately that's it. And we've got to think, as we've talked about before, a lot of folks who have been in hazardous materials, it's an older generation, and a lot of those people are retiring voluntarily or involuntarily. Or leaving, leaving the industry, or kind of moving on from those companies, and so that transition brings in a lot of new people who may not know and may not have that institutional knowledge of what to do or what not to do. So again, being prepared, working with someone who can help you do that. So either it's a mentor that you have, or companies like Stars to be able to kind of support with that.
Yeah. And if you, the other thing about that too, Andrew, is a lot of times it'll be a pass down of information, right? Like the old experienced guy who's been doing it for 40 years, he doesn't know necessarily what the regulations are. He doesn't necessarily know what the industry is doing because he's worked for this company his whole career. What he knows is what you guys do. which may or may not be compliant. It may or may not be the optimal way to do it. But the new guy that comes on, he doesn't read the rules either or know about the industry. He just learns from this guy. So you end up with this legacy of information, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it also means that there may be cost savings that you're missing. There may be regulatory requirements that you're not complying with. There may be efficiencies that you could take advantage of that you just simply don't know exist. And it's just because that's how each of those people were trained. And one more thing about that is, like you said, the old retired guys have been around for 40 years or whatever. The new guys just coming on have, maybe 5 years of experience or maybe none at all. There's not a whole lot of people in our age bracket, Andrew, that are in this industry. Like, this middle group of people are missing. So there's not necessarily always a real good hand down of information, because a lot of times those older guys leave before the newer guys become experienced enough. But also, I was a 20-something, 30-something year old person once, many, many years ago. And I didn't necessarily always appreciate the expertise of my coworkers and really tap them for the information before they weren't there anymore. And, I would venture to say that there's probably a lot of other 20 and 30-somethings out there who maybe don't think like that either. So if you're like me, keep in mind that you're not always going to have those people to rely on, and they have a wealth of information.
No doubt. Well, and the thing is, for those who are in the sort of 20s and 30s, is absorb all of that information, then you become extremely valuable, not only to your company, but to the industry in general, to be able to do, whether it's moving up and doing that, then you can become that person in the future. So I think, it's one of, the more that you learn, the more that the more valuable you become, like I said, either to your company or to another company potentially.
That's great advice.
So it's a really, really, career advancement. That's, ultimately what a lot of people are taking a look at. So you may not be looking at it in the Hazmatters podcast, but we can provide some of that for you too.
Yes. That's the weird thing about Hazmat. People study to be mechanics, or they study to be electricians, or they study to be doctors. No one ever sets out to say, I want to be a hazmat person. You just sort of end up here. It's usually like, John left, and so now it's Dave's job, and Dave's like, I've never seen hazmat before. And they're like, well, figure it out. So more than once I've seen somebody thrown into a role of the hazmat manager, and they don't know anything about it. But then it gets in your blood, and then you're stuck.
And so, no doubt. And I think, that's one of those things, is that to accept that, not to fight against it. Oh, I don't want to do hazmat or whatever, because like I said, it can be transportation is very much the same way. Is you don't necessarily enter the industry saying, or leave college or wherever, you can say, I want to be in transportation. There are definitely some who do, but most of us end up here through one reason or another. You're starting in marketing, or you start in sales, and you get pulled in, or, whatever. But once it's there, it becomes a part of who you are and what you do. One of the things that about yesterday was in regards to, when the inspection is happening and the inspector is talking about, hey, you need to do this or you need to do that. You had mentioned yesterday how much that sometimes the inspector is either bringing something that they're familiar with that another company is doing, but isn't necessarily the true requirement of the regulation. And so, the idea about asking, show me where that is in the regulations for me to do that, because it could be something very expensive or something that's very time consuming that really isn't necessary. So I know.
I've been seeing, and I've always seen that in this industry, but it seems to be a lot more lately. And I kind of attribute that to what I was just talking about. The old hats are leaving, all these new guys are coming in. They don't have necessarily the same level of expertise and experience that the older guys had. And so they're just going on based on what they know. They don't, even the inspectors don't always sit down and read the book themselves. So if an inspector is telling you something that you need to do, first of all, don't get combative, right? Don't argue with them, because that is never going to work out well for you. They have all the power, unfortunately. But what you do have is you have the ability to say to them, okay, show me where that is in the regulations. And honestly, they may not know the regulatory citation off the top of their head, but even if they say to you, okay, I'll get back to you with that, but write that down in the notes that you're taking and make sure they do get back to you with that. Because if they're going to expect you to do something, whether it's an outrageous request or it's just something that doesn't make sense for your company, or it's something that you're unfamiliar with, if it's not in that book, they can't enforce it. I've heard lots of inspectors even use the phrase, well, I'd like to see you do this. Fabulous, but I'm not going to do that. And you don't have to if it's not in that book.
Right. Understood. One of the things that you had just mentioned was the idea of, again, taking notes, like setting up a file for this inspection. So the documents that you're presenting to the inspector, notes, questions, again, who needs to do what and when, and having a very, detailed file about this specific inspection. Are there some other things that you would say should be in that file?
Yeah, you had mentioned yesterday recording the meeting. If the inspector will agree to let you record it, then do that. Chances are they're not going to let you do that, though. So take good notes. And if you are going to be the main person conducting the meeting, get somebody else to take notes. Bring in someone else who is who's good at that, who can take detailed notes, who isn't necessarily going to be part of the conversation, so they can focus on that piece. Because like you said, what they want to do is they want to capture any questions that the inspector has or any issues that they highlight. If they have a finding and they discuss that with you, you want to write down what they said, what they thought was a problem, why it's a problem. If they give you a regulatory citation right there, ask them when they're going to have the written report so that you can follow up. They're supposed to have it within 7 days, the first initial draft. Now, that's not necessarily going to be a violation report. It's going to be an inspection report. And it'll mark on there whether they're going to issue a violation. Then they have, I believe it's 30 days to issue the violation. And so, of course, it never happens in 30 days, but that's another story. So, ask them, when are we going to see the written report? Some of them will give it to you before they leave. I was never quite that organized. Most of the people that I worked with were not quite that organized, and they would, do it when they get back to their office, or a lot of them save all the reports for Fridays and they do your office work on Fridays and they'll send them all out then. So it might take a couple of days to get to you, but that's why you take the notes, right? Take notes on whatever they say, when they're going to get the report to you. If they tell you that you have to do something, write down what they said, and then write down, if they were able to show you the regulations where that was, like, one of my clients was saying that the inspector told them that they had to have a book ready for him with all of the documents that he wants to see every time he comes in. And my client's like, do I really have to do that? No, that's not required. Now, do you have to provide the documentation? Yes, but you don't have to put it in a book that's according to his specifications. Put this in front, this next, that. No, you don't have to have a book at all. You have to have a file where you can go to and get that stuff within a reasonable time frame. But yeah, and so and then obviously don't get confrontational, right? If you don't like something that he says, either ask a polite question or say nothing at all and just listen. Getting into a fight with your inspector is the worst possible thing that you could do, because he has a lot of friends.
No. And even just like how you ask the question is, hey, I'm not familiar with that citation, or, however you want to approach it, to say, help me understand. I mean, that's one of the main reasons why the inspector's there, is not necessarily to point out what you've done wrong, is to help you to do it better going forward. Again, it's all about safety. It's all about moving it forward. So again, approaching it in that way is help me to understand.
Yeah, definitely. And what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to be focused on achieving safety, achieving regulatory compliance to improve safety. Unfortunately, they don't all look at it that way. But yes, that is, and you're right, the help me understand has worked so well for me over the years. So I fully support that.
No doubt. So, again, we've kind of talked about some of the things to do. And I know you've got some great stories about things of not to do, during the inspection there. Besides it, don't be confrontational. Don't treat it as though it's an annoyance or a waste of your time. It is important. And again, they're there for a reason. Stuff like that. But you said you had some other stories. I know there was the cat story that you wanted.
Yeah. So I'll start I'll start by saying, don't tell the inspector they can't come in. When the inspector shows up on the door, you don't tell them, get off our property, because you may not know that they have the ability to get the U.S. federal marshals or even the state police to grant them access. So they may leave at that moment, but you know what they're doing is they're going in, they're calling their general counsel and saying, hey, XYZ chemical company wouldn't let me in the door. I need some help. So they'll either call the federal marshals and force you to let them in, or they'll call the state police, and they will be granted entry whether you like it or not. So uh, that is definitely not what you can do. Now, you must ask for their credentials. I always ding a company when I was an FRA inspector if they didn't ask for my credentials. Just because they show up on your door and tell you they're an inspector, whether it's DOT, EPA, OSHA, whatever, doesn't mean they are. So make sure every federal inspector, every state inspector is supposed to have a picture identification with their state or federal credentials in there. And if they don't have it, then you don't grant them entry. If they've got a problem with that, then you call the police. Let the police sort it out. But okay, so that being said, the other thing you shouldn't do is what this one person did when I was an FRA inspector. Myself and my boss at the time showed up on this company's property, and they said, hey, we're here to do an inspection because, the DOT inspectors are not allowed to make appointments. Well, let me put that. FRA inspectors are not allowed to make appointments. Some of the other agencies do, but FRA inspectors just show up whenever they want to. And so we showed up and we said, hey, we want to do an inspection. They're like, I'm sorry. And I forget the woman's name, but let's say it's Maria. I don't know. Maria's out today. Can you come back another day? No, we cannot come back another day. We're doing the inspection today, like right now. I had another guy say he was too busy to deal with us that day. That's not your choice, dude. So when the lady with Maria, I'm using her name, I don't remember. So we went in and we finally got that in the conference room, and we asked for some documentation, and they said, oh, well, that's Maria's purview. Let's see if we can get her on the phone. So they get Maria on the phone. She's at home and with us on speakerphone, and she knows this. The company asked her, hey, Maria, would you be able to come down for an hour to give the inspectors some things, because they didn't have anybody cross-trained. They didn't know how else to get that stuff. And she actually said, no, I can't do that. I have to give my cat a pill. She said that to her bosses, the federal inspectors. I don't know what happened after that, but the look on her boss's face gave me the impression that she was going to be unemployed tomorrow.
It's a lot to get the cat to take the pill. You've got to take it.
I mean, at least pretend you've got a sick kid or something to say you can't deal with the federal inspection or give anyone information because you have to give your cat a pill. That was honestly the best excuse that I ever heard for why the documentation couldn't be provided. So the boss was mortified, obviously, and myself and my boss, who was there, told the guys, like, this is completely unacceptable. You need to be able to give us the stuff when we show up, but under the circumstances, because you're not prepared, we're going to give you 3 days to get it to us. We don't have it in 3 days, there's going to be a violation, whatever. We didn't have to give him those 3 days, but, most of us are human and understanding. But I'll tell you something, the next time we went in there, there was no question as to who was going to do it, because more than one person knew how. So yeah, we didn't have that problem with that company again, but they learned a very valuable and painful lesson that day, and they almost got a real big fine for it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you could just see the couple. Number one, they don't know how to get the information. The person's not there, so that's going to be a red flag. The second is, if that is the person who's responsible's response, you've got to say there's a lot of bad processes in place here that this person, number one, thinks that's an acceptable answer. The fact that they are unable to do that, that sets it up not only for this particular issue of about, but just how they manage their business. And so it's really, again, this comes back to all of those things.
Yeah. One of the ways my old boss used to put it, the same guy I
Yeah.
was talking about,
Um,
is he used to say, if you get hit by the runaway garbage truck, who's going to be able to do the job tomorrow? There was more than one time I walked into a company and the stuff was in a locked file cabinet and so was on vacation or was out for the day or whatever. And no one else had a key. Like, thank God that person's alive and healthy, but what if they weren't all of a sudden? What if they got into an accident, God forbid? You can't leave your company records in the hands of one single person. It's just too risky.
yep, no doubt. Um, and then just kind of the follow up to an inspection on that. Again, you definitely want to provide any of the information that they've requested. Validating again, is it a valid request of what they're asking, and being able to do that. But providing information, providing documentation, providing all of those kinds of things. Is there anything else that you, as a former inspector, would say this went a long way for a positive experience?
Yeah, I can comment on that in just a second. I did want to add, you actually had asked me, some things not to do. And while you were asking me that, I thought of another one. Don't show them more than they're asking for. All right. You're not there to get their approval. You're not there to blow their mind away with the wonderful things that you're doing. If they ask to see XYZ, you give them XYZ. You don't give them ABC too. Don't open the door for things that you don't need to. There's some inspectors who are very helpful and will answer your questions all day long. They'll give you guidance, but they're not all like that. And there's only so much guidance they're allowed to give you. So if you have uh, questions or you want to know something about what they're not asking, find someone else to ask, right? Another institute professional, a consultant, whatever. But yeah, okay. So some things that go a long way. Uh, Going back to what you said again, being prepared, right? Being kind, being cooperative, being professional. You know, you don't offer the inspector a beer, right? And they are not allowed to take any kind of bribes. So, no matter what you're manufacturing, no matter how much they think it's really cool, you can't send them home with any. And they're not allowed to take it. And honestly, you don't want them to take it because God forbid they do, and there's any sort of issue later, then it's going to be that you gave them a bribe, which is of course illegal. So yeah, you don't want to offer them your products as a, hey, like I went to a company that manufactured cleaning products when I was an inspector. And I loved learning about their process. It was really kind of cool. It was the first time that I had seen something like that. I was younger. So I was really fascinated by the whole operation, and I really got a lot of value out of it. But then when they wanted to send me home with, a laundry detergent and a dishwashing detergent and this and that, I'm like, guys, I am so grateful, but I cannot take that. So, um, yeah, but the fact that they gave me the education and they took the time to explain something, which was actually technically a little bit outside of my jurisdiction, but I became really fascinated by it, and they were kind enough to walk me through it. And to this day, I still remember that guy and that company with great fondness. And had I stayed there inspector longer, and done more inspections for them, I'm sure they would have gone equally well. That they had, everything in order. The place was clean. It was obviously well maintained. It was, the housekeeping was done. When I asked for different records, they were able to get them within a couple of minutes. Um, when I told them a few things that they didn't want to hear, and they didn't get confrontational, and I said, well, we've never heard that before. We've never done that. So I opened the book and I said, okay, well, here's what it says. This is telling you that you have to do this, but there's different ways for you to do that, right? Just being someone they want to work with. If they leave the place with a bad taste in their mouth, they're going to look a lot harder and ding you for things that they might have given you a pass on before.
Right. And I think that's a big point right there, is that if it's a positive interaction, because that person's now going to go home or wherever they're going to go to write that report. And if you're on the line about something, if you were an ass, you're gonna go over the line, and you
Yeah,
might
they
get
can
a
either check
final
that
penalty
defect box.
because of that behavior.
Exactly. They can either check
Yeah.
that defect box or they can check that violation box. If they check the defect box, that's okay, this isn't good, but I'm going to give you time to fix it. If they check that violation box, they're going to be like, okay, open your wallet. So if, and that's entirely the inspector's discretion. They don't have to issue a violation. They don't have to give you a pass. It's entirely the inspector's discretion, and no one in the agency is going to dispute that. So if they give you a violation, you're stuck. But like you said, if I'm on the fence about something and you were really good to work with and you were very cooperative, I'm probably going to give you some more time, and I'm going to check the defect box, and then I'm going to come back and check on you again later. If I check that violation box, now you're going to have to pay.
Yep, absolutely. And so, just moving in that regard. And so, because we're pulling this all together, number one is be prepared, because inspections can happen at any time. And you want to be prepared for it, regardless of whether it's a new company that's coming online. Again, ways to go do that, as we talked about before, training, super important. Make sure that you understand not only your responsibility, but also, what it is that your company does and how it is impacted by OSHA, EPA, DOT, PHMSA, FMCSA regulation, FRA, whatever it may be. And if you don't, ask. Again, ignorance is, as you stated before, ignorance is not an excuse. And, you need to know. You are working with dangerous things. You need to know what's going on with that. Work with a consultant on that. But it's the preparation of what's going on. But understand that even when you're fully prepared, bad things can happen. Equipment breaks, things leak. It's part of what's going on, and it's what you do about it, and how you make sure that it doesn't happen again, and how you work towards that. That's super important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. So, this is dangerous stuff. And if you don't know what you don't know, find out. You can, certainly our company would be more than happy to help, but there's other companies that, have different qualifications for different things and can be just as helpful. So seek out the help. There'll be people out there who can help you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, asking questions is not a bad thing.
Yes.
There's that. But so, kind of today we talked about inspections. So again, thank you so much, Wendy, for all of your insights and experience on both sides of the table, on all three sides of the table, both as the inspector, working for a company where you were inspected, and then, now supporting really both sides of it. Helping inspectors. We do training.
Yes, actually, I'm going to be doing some training. Yeah, I'm going to be doing some training for the inspectors. So I'm kind of excited about that. DOT has asked me to do some training classes, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So there's really full circle there of supporting what's going on and the knowledge and expertise that gets shared. So again, thank you so much for your time today, Wendy. Thanks to everybody for joining. We appreciate it, and look forward to our next conversation.
See you soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining the Hazmatters Podcast, brought to you by Stars Hazmat Consulting. To learn more about how Stars can help you for training and compliance, by building processes and programs, for fines and penalty mitigation, for questions about hazmat responsibilities and the regulations that govern our industry, visit our website at starshazmat.com or give us a call at 267-324-4002.